and this is where it becomes really challenging, is if you're someone that's in particularly professional services. So let's say, you've worked hard at school, you got a good degree, and you're in a professional environment. So you could be potentially, let's say, a lawyer, for argument's sake. This is not beneath you. If you're a year one lawyer, you're probably on 70 or 80 grand a year. And even if you've moved up the totem pole and you're kicking goals and you've moved into a more senior position, it's not going to be more than 150 or 180 grand a year. That is not necessarily enough to get the job done. Now, chances are you're probably working big hours if you're in that industry, given how effective Leap is at dollarizing every 6 minutes of your working life. But the reality is that a lot of people that are in professional services are, if I get a side hustle, it looks like I'm not succeeding in what I do. They're putting their ego and what other people might think about them ahead of their long-term financial success. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show. This week we are exploring the side hustle. What are the elements that you need to get kicked off with it? Even if you have nothing, you'd be surprised at what you can do. Once you get started, what are the benefits? Key thing here, you've got to have a bit of clarity on what your goals are. And once you work those out, get yourself a game plan for getting there. And there'll be plenty of game plan for you in this podcast. See you in the show. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show with me, your host, Andrew Baxter. And as always, my co-host and offsider, Mitchell Olarenshaw.
Good to be here, Mr. B. Looking good today in a suit.
Thank you.
Upstaged.
I've upped my sock game post-Christmas for some reason. The kids
have to.
Obviously recognise the deficiency in my outfit, so sharp as.
Classic present, isn't it? Underpants, socks, or barbecue tools. You can't go wrong, right?
Happy days.
Good stuff. Well, hey, look, jumping straight into today's conversation. A topic we often get asked, particularly when we do mentoring and conversations one-on-one with clients, is building out a side hustle apart from their 9-to-5 job. So today's all about building wealth as a side hustle outside of your normal 9-to-5.
Look, it's not a luxury anymore. Having a second or third form of income, back in the day, it's a big luxury to aim for. I think given where we are, and I'm sure we'll dive deep on some of this stuff, it's a necessity now. It's a difficult environment for people, so having a side hustle income, it is just simply a necessity.
Totally. And I guess if we consider the context of which we're in right now, many people in Australia are doing it pretty tough, particularly as we've just had Christmas. I'm sure everyone's probably overate, overspent, and the credit card bills have come. You start to realize that, gee whiz, life's actually pretty expensive.
So many households now are in a month-to-month situation or week to week. And a large contributor to that, of course, are mortgage payments, but also compounded with the cost of living. I just saw something over about a week or so ago in the media. There's a tradie, he had bought his first property, and his mortgage has just moved off the honeymoon rate to the variable rate, and effectively that's doubled his mortgage repayments. And it's like, where does the dough come from? It has to come from somewhere. And when you can then combine that with the general cost of living, going out and about, breakfast now is a $20+ exercise for something that was probably $7 or $8, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
If you go out for a beer, it's $12 or $14 now from $7 or $8 a couple of years ago. And these are just anecdotal things that you see just going about your normal business of trying to enjoy life in this great country that we live in. So, heaven forbid you go to the supermarket and fill it with groceries. It's genuinely tough out there for people. So, that budget being very, very stretched, there's a level of cost cutting that you can do through budgeting, but there's only so much cost cutting you can do. You also have to get the denominator, the money coming in, to be able to increase, which is possible, and I guess that's what we're going to explore through this interview.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a couple of small business owners a few days ago at the weekend, who are small business cafe owners. And they were talking about some of the troubles they had just in terms of how much stuff costs. So their only option to keep that business afloat was that they both had to work every day, Monday to Friday, effectively on their own, and then maybe employ some weekend staff. If you start to employ staff, it's too expensive. The cost of produce, far too expensive. And when you actually run the numbers, you realise for the everyday Australian who's potentially a business owner paying staff, paying for produce, paying for supplies, whatever it is, it makes it really challenging. I mean, I think we did a podcast, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, where we spoke about how 45% of Australians, I believe, had less than $2,000 in liquid cash in their account. If something goes wrong, there's not a lot of breathing room.
You have to have that war chest, that emergency fund. And again, having a second form of income the benefits of which can be starting to build that up amongst other things too. And it is very real out there. The cost of labour in Australia now is stratospheric. I was just having a conversation last night with my dad, and we were talking about Italy, where we spent a lot of time, and comparing that to going out for lunch or dinner here. And the wage cost in Italy, probably 9 to maybe 13 euros an hour. Now in Australia, you'd be lucky to get anyone for 35 to 40 bucks an hour, especially on a weekend. So that money has to come from somewhere. And like if I take my local coffee shop, they put their prices up again. Plus now you've got to pay the merchant fee if you happen to pay with credit card.
Yep.
But then, you look at your labour costs, your input costs, coffee prices have gone up, electricity is more expensive. I'm sure insurance for running a cafe has gone through the roof. Your labour costs on a Sunday are probably 40, plus you got 2-3 people working there. You've got to sell an awful lot of coffee to make that work. And unfortunately, those costs do get then pushed on to the consumer. And, you're looking at $6 for a coffee now, which, a handful of years ago would have been $3.
Yeah, my parents in the cafe game, I remember when I was really young, I think it was $2.80 for a flat white. I mean, those were the good old days.
Be nice to lock that in. Could have a long-dated option on that. Would have been all right, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, being the son of the owner, I was okay. It was always free for me. But look, I think, as we progress further in this conversation, AB, for people out there, there's probably different objectives as to what they may want out of a side hustle. It could be extra spending money, so you can take the family to breakfast. It could be a war chest. It could be with the goal of investing. Let's break this down. You and I talk about this quite extensively. There's really 3 gateways to having a side hustle. The first is having a skill set.
Well, the triangle, there's one of 3 things. If you have all 3 things, great. If you have one of those 3 things, that's all you've got to work with. So if you want a side hustle, and we're in a world now where everyone's, live your passion and follow your dreams and do all that, but sometimes you just got to roll the sleeves up and do what you need to do as well.
That's right.
So you break down 3 areas. What resource do you bring to it? Do you have time? Do you have a skill set? Or do you have money? And any one of those 3 will get you into a side hustle. If you've got all 3, then you've got a lot more choices available to you. So, if we start with the end game, which is to have more income or to have more money to have a side hustle, or to create more income to build a bigger nest egg to win the game of money, I suppose. If you've got assets sitting in the bank right now, and look, we all need to have some level of cash in terms of a cash reserve or an emergency fund, and plus some breathing space. But if you're sitting there holding cash because interest rates, for example, are higher than what they have been, you think, well, that's an okay return on money. It really isn't when you take out the cost of living increase that sits alongside that.
Totally.
I think 2023 cost of living was 7% jump in Australia, and interest rates aren't paying 7% on a savings account. So
no chance.
Your money is going backward in terms of what you can do with it. So you have to get it working, and you have to choose carefully, because there's probably more choice than ever before, but there's also more confusion than ever before. You've got to be very clear on that which you want. And I think we'll dive into that as we start to talk about different types of investments that you get in. So you've got to build cash. If you don't have the cash to start with, well, that leaves you a choice of one or of 2 things, or maybe you have both. And that is, if you have time, you have to choose how you're going to spend that time on something that can create more income for you. Or if you have a particular set of skills, is to be able to use, can't help but think of Liam Neeson in Taken when I think of that.
I kind of smirked thinking the same thing, to be honest.
A particular set of skills. But if you've got a set of skills, is how do you then go about dollarizing that? So let's say you're a keen photographer, and it might be that you can get into providing photography services, because you start doing weddings at weekends, or private parties, or christenings, or whatever it might be, where you're exchanging the skill set you have for an additional form of income. Obviously, that's also going to require some level of time to put into that too. So having both becomes quite important. If you have no money and you have no specific skills that you can dollarize, well, what you have then is but you do have time, is, well, how can you spend that time to build up that plan B income? And let's take Uber as an example. It doesn't require a high level of skill, although resource-wise you need to have a car, and it needs to be a newish car that works, and a few other odds and ends that go alongside that. But there's an example where you can then start to trade, your time for a side income of additional dollars. And a lot of people balk at the idea of that, Mitch, but we're in a world today, and I'm not going to harp back to the good old days of black and white TV where people work, much, much longer hours. But by law now, people work significantly less hours than what they used to, which gives them a vacuum of time that they can put into this. It's just a question of whether they want to choose to step up to the plate. There's the challenge. Everyone wants more, but are you prepared to pay the price of admission, which is trading your time for some more income?
It's funny you say that. Let's just break that down. Let's say you spent 2 hours a day on Instagram during the week, right? So that's potentially 10 hours a week, working week that is. That 10 hours a week could be put towards an extra day of work or something that you're doing on the side, which could result in potentially $500 to $600 extra of cash flow per week gross. So when you just look at it that simply each day, just chipping away, it does make a really big difference. I mean, what would $500 or $600 do for the average Australian extra per week?
Too right, and it's but you've got to be bone honest with yourself. How do you spend your time? And getting into the death scroll, the brain rot, is such an easy thing to do, and it's designed by algorithm to do that very effectively by one of the smartest people on the planet. So you're up against that, and opting out of those things to say, I'm going to have a social media holiday and see the vacuum of time, for example, that it can create. Other people have got different habits that they spend their time doing, in which case you could potentially free up time there. TV is a big one. Most people spend probably more time on TV than they do on personal development. And if you switch that time from TV into an income producing thing, let's say it's eBay, for example, or Amazon, and these things they're all, nothing's breaking news there. They've been around forever. It's not like the new Vanguard cutting edge stuff is, I've just discovered that I can make money on the side, being a reseller on Amazon, for example. A mate of mine's run a course and sold tens of thousands of units. The people are doing that stuff, they have for a while. The point is, there's so much opportunity there. And one of the biggest challenges, I did an interview on this just with the media just before Christmas on this, and this is where it becomes really challenging, is if you're someone that's in particularly professional services. So let's say, you've worked hard at school, you got a good degree, and you're in a professional environment. So you could be potentially, let's say, a lawyer, for argument's sake. This is not beneath you. If you're a year one lawyer, you're probably on 70 or 80 grand a year. And even if you've moved up the totem pole and you're kicking goals and you've moved into a more senior position, it's not going to be more than 150 or 180 grand a year. That is not necessarily enough to get the job done. Now, chances are you're probably working big hours if you're in that industry, given how effective Leap is at dollarizing every 6 minutes of your working life. But the reality is that a lot of people that are in professional services if I get a side hustle, it looks like I'm not succeeding in what I do. They're putting their ego and what other people might think about them ahead of their long-term financial success. And I'd really encourage people to park ego and what other people have got to say to the side and focus on what is it that you want out of life, how are you going to get it, and what are some of the resources that you need. If it's more income to buy another investment property or to reduce your debt or to get your HECS paid off so that you can come up for air, that's what you've got to embrace and just kick to the curb what other people think.
Totally. I mean, you can even go harder, more hardcore again. I mean, you take the Grant Cardone approach, it's give up weekends for 5 years and see how you turn out, which we're not suggesting all of our listeners do, by the way, but you can take this as easy or as hard as you like. If you've got time, you can spend it. If you've got a skill set, a passion, potentially you can use it. What about if you've got money, AB?
Well, if you're in a situation and you think, that's a first world problem, but then you've got to decide where you're going to deploy it. And what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve growth? Are you trying to achieve income? Is it more about a longer term game plan? And I guess the way to create that surplus money is, number one, to make sure you get your debt knocked off. So there are some steps between starting a side hustle and suddenly having a pot of gold. And I guess we can cut through those in a few moments. But if you've got cash as an asset to work with, choosing where to deploy it is crucial. And there comes a level of responsibility with that. So if you're parking it into a property, well, just at the research stage on that is Pandora's box, because what are you looking for? Positively geared, negatively geared? Are you looking for a capital growth area? Are you looking for something that's got more solid income? Are you looking at commercial property, which will potentially have a higher yield but probably have a higher vacancy rate? How does that line up with what's going on within the economy? There's an awful lot of inputs to then park into that. And I think the challenge for many people, just talking about one type of investment being property, is with all those inputs, it could be right or wrong. You start to second guess yourself and it's easy to do nothing, and you just sit and hibernate for another year and miss that great opportunity. You have to get it working. So get it into an index tracker in the stock market, for example, through through an ETF. Very, very, very simple. Pick a high dividend one if it's income that you're looking for. Learn how to do some of our stuff like covered calls and cash flow on demand if you want to get some income from that investment, but get it working for you so it's outperforming bank interest and giving you a chance of growing your wealth.
Got you. And look, if you don't know where to start, talk to a professional, talk to an advisor. So our team, Your Money Advisor, or even Australian Investment Education can help. Just to throw a bit of a curveball at you, AB, what's a side hustle or a second job that you've had in your life, just out of interest?
Probably one of...
Let's trade a few blows here.
Okay, so when I was at school, I worked in a bakery. And one of the things I used to do on the side is make birthday cakes to order for people at school, £5 a pop, and that was a great side hustle. That was an absolute ripper. And I was at quite a large comprehensive school in the UK, so about 1,400 kids. So if you work the maths out on that, that's 30 birthdays a week. Say you get 2%, or let's say you get 5 people a week coming to £25 a week in your pocket. Unbelievably
Happy
great
days.
Awesome. So that was a pretty good one. I played rugby league when I was at university. That helped a lot too.
That always helps, yeah.
And a little bit of cash, which was certainly needed at that point in time. And then, I guess once I started on my career proper, I've been in a fortunate position that it's been quite a lucrative career pathway, and so most of my resources have gone back into that avenue rather than looking for distractions.
Gotcha.
But I've done property development, all that sort of stuff outside. How about yourself?
One that I used to do when I was quite young. I was still working for my parents at the time at school playing footy, but we used to go to Bali quite a lot. So I used to go to Bali, I'd borrow money off my parents so I could buy shoes in Bali. I'd bring them back to Australia and I would sell them on eBay at a dial-up, give my parents back the loan money, collect the profit, reinvest
interest, or was it interest-free loan?
Interest-free.
Family loan.
Interest-free. It wasn't, we're not talking big amounts here, but, I'd go and buy 10 pairs of shoes, sell all 10, take the dial-up and, 15 or 16 and make a couple of $100 out of it. That was great for me at the time. I loved it.
Good skill set too, because it gets you around selling, which is a key thing. And you have to have something. And the idea of a side hustle sometimes too isn't just simply about money. It's also the growth pathway that you go on. And I was quite introverted as a kid because I was an only child, and I still enjoy my own company. And I remember my dad's way of personal development, and we still have a laugh about this. You got to get a part-time job after school. I said, okay, and I was been about 13 or something like that. I said, well, how do you go about doing that? He said, you just ask. I said, well, who? He said, I'll show you. So he said, right, drop me off at one, and it turned out to be someone he knew. I didn't realise that at the time at their farm. He said, right, go down, knock on the door, ask for a job.
Fine, fair enough.
And what I find, you look at the personal development aspect of that, and your confidence of just knocking on a door and then having to literally be so vulnerable as to say, look, I'm looking for a part-time job. What can you do? I don't know, I'm 13, so probably not much, 14, whatever. And I was a big kid, but and they're life lessons. And if I look at the interpersonal skills and I guess the confidence that you build from that, and you can walk on stage somewhere in the world in front of 10,000 people, and it's not a challenge because you've taken the time to acquire that sort of inner confidence of not being afraid of being outside of your comfort zone, which so many people are.
I handed my resume out at Pac Fair once when I was quite young, 17, 18. Not one person hired me, unfortunately.
Rejection's great.
Didn't have a good enough sales pitch.
Now, rejection is great, and you either collapse in a heap or you learn from it. Like you say, you revise your sales pitch, improve your confidence, and you don't let it get you down because it's just an outcome, and you can change what you do. Yet so many people live in fear of a loss of face or a loss of confidence because someone didn't say yes. People don't say yes in life to much. It's usually no, and if you fold at no, you're never going to get anywhere. So you got to build that resilience. So, building a side hustle isn't just about the money; it's about building that confidence or skill set that sits around that too. So there's multiple benefits to that. Getting onto the benefits. So we talk about getting extra dough. What do you do with it? And you could pay down debt.
That's always a good one.
Get your mortgage payments under control.
More security and safety in that sense, right?
Get rid of your credit card problems if you've got bad debt like that. Build up that war chest so you've got a month and then 3 months of emergency funding to give you some peace of mind. Then you start to accumulate that number where you can then have money to add to the equation to what you're doing. So you've started working, using your time more effectively, potentially learning a new skill if you don't have that skill now, learning what it is. Like I never expected to be a baker. And yet, this is my wife, and he's probably sick to death of it. And he's, oh yeah, I used to work in a bakery. I used to be a baker, and people are like rubbish. And I said, no, I didn't. It's probably I probably enjoyed that job more than anything because there's something tangible to show, and it's a great skill that everywhere in the world people need bread or cakes or whatever it might be. And I enjoy doing baking with the kids. And they go, how do you know? Oh, you never used to work in a bakery. I did. I did it for about 3 years. And the only reason I stayed 3 years because it was such a lucrative sideline at school. I was on £1 an hour, so there's no money working there. The money was in the sideline and having access to all the tools and gear and everything there to do it.
Days.
So, but and so you're picking up a skill set which can really only help you. And look, one that if you're younger listening to this, which will seem a bit of a silly thing to talk about, is you can start getting additional money into your super. And it seems like, when you start to talk about, the back end of life when you're quite young, the earlier you get money into that and get it working for you, the quicker you can pull stumps and do things. So I've been doing a heap of stuff with Channel 7, or certainly last year, and with David Koch. And one of the things that we talked about was, that 4 steps to getting, potentially doubling your retirement nest egg. So number one, working out where you're at and deciding to get control. Once you've got control, choosing better quality assets. And once you've got control, ideally through an SMSF. Now, you can't do that when you're starting out. You need to have a couple $100,000, but you never get to a couple $100,000 if you never start. And have that money going in there, get control of it, contribute as much as you humanly can from a tax perspective. And before you know it, if you're doing all of those steps, you're in a position where, retirement is something that's very, very comfortable and you've got access to it, all through a silly side hustle that you heard 2 Muppets talking about on a podcast once, and that's the reality of what life can be. And everybody wants the rainbow, Mitch, but nobody wants the storm. And the rainbow is financial security, or a removal of financial stress, or being able to retire earlier, or to have a bigger house, not for the size, but maybe you need more functional space. If you've got a family and you're in a 2-bedroom apartment, it's not much fun. That ability to have more choice, which is really what life is all about. And it starts by using the assets you have, with that time, whether that's skill, or whether that's already a pot of money to do something with, and using them wisely. Because time goes by so quickly, and if you don't jump on it early, you don't get compounding. You don't get compounding, you never get financial success.
And I think importantly with this too, before you do decide to engage in a side hustle, is to have a goal. I think I've seen plenty of people start a side hustle, realize they've got extra cash, and then spend it, and then there's no point to having one in the first place, right? So if your goal is to pay off your credit card or pay down your mortgage, and that's the goal that you've set before the side hustle, you can then adequately work towards that, which I think is really important. And that'll be different for everyone, because you might be wanting to reduce debt, you might be wanting to invest money in the stock market, buy a house, whatever it is, but have that goal in mind beforehand.
You have to be clear on it. Like my wife is a great example to wrap up quite a number of these things. So my wife is a lawyer, she's a partner in a law firm, and achieved that at a pretty young age, massive overachiever. So she's very much ensconced in the professional services industry. Now, her goal was to own a house, and you think, okay, you're a lawyer, but she firstly was a trainee lawyer and then had to get admitted, and then you're a junior.
It's tough.
And the income isn't great. And so she and a friend set up a organic dips business and called Dipalicious. And they cleaned up. This is before my time.
Okay.
And they used to do markets on a Saturday and Sunday.
Okay.
And the friend that she did it with was in the corporate world too. And it became very, very successful quite quickly. But when you talk about the trade-off, so Thursday would be getting the ingredients, Friday prep, making, Saturday and Sunday early start, get the pitches out of the various markets, the organic markets, the farmers markets over the road, all that sort of stuff. Do the thing on Saturday, Sunday through to lunchtime. So now you're not going out on Friday and Saturday night because you're up early, so your spending is somewhat curtailed. And she bought her first house when she was 20.
Wow, 20 years old.
She graduated when she was 20 and bought her first property because she had that additional income coming in on top of being a junior lawyer.
Yeah.
And there's a good example of someone that's an uber overachiever in virtually everything she's done, particularly marrying me, obviously. But
I was going to say, now I know where your kids get their smarts from, right?
But, that's an example where you put your ego aside and say, yes, I'm a lawyer and I'm going really well and I don't want to be seen to, oh, what are you doing working on a market store? Aren't you? I am. And guess what? On another property. How are you going?
That's right.
Simple as that. So ego aside, follow those steps and you'd be blown away where it can take you. And, we could go through and recount multiple success stories, whether it's my school line of birthday cakes when I worked at the bakery and my wife's experience doing that, yourself with sneakers and plenty of other things in between. But if you want it, and that's where the goal is so important, everyone wants something, but if you don't have clarity on what it is and an emotional buy into what it is, it'll never happen. So if you want to be successful, you want your first, second, third property, you want to pay your debt down, you want to have choices in life. What does that really mean to you? Spend some time working out what that goal is and then be prepared to roll the sleeves up and pay the price of admission. And it doesn't have to be not fun. If you find something you really enjoy doing, it becomes a passion and you never have to work a day in your life.
That's right. Now, lastly, before we wrap up for our listeners, AB, tax implications. A lot of people think that if you have a second job, you're actually taxed at the highest marginal tax rate.
Yep.
That's no longer the truth. According to the ATO, it's just at your normal marginal tax rate.
Correct. So, I don't want to pay that, I'll pay extra tax. No, you pay tax at your marginal tax rate. So as your income goes up and you move into a new tax bracket, well, obviously you're then going to be taxed at that. This is where structuring becomes important. These are, to get someone started on a side hustle, you don't want any friction. But if you're starting something and it really starts to grow, and you look at companies like Canva that started as a side hustle, getting your structuring sorted out as it grows to make sure that what you're doing is tax effective, tax efficient, and the IP that you're building is protected, your side hustle can quite quickly overtake that which you end up doing in your normal Monday to Friday slog. And so then you can explore lots of other tax avenues there. But getting started, you're going to be taxed at whatever your marginal tax rate is. That's just how it is. That's what it is. And it shouldn't be an impediment to get started. We all have to pay tax. It's part of the journey. And, just roll your sleeves up and pile in.
Well, might be a bit tough in that jacket, AB, but nevertheless, thank you very much for having us on today.
Nice segue to close on. Well done.
Thank you. I'm getting better. It's a new year, new me.
Frightening. Where can this go?
Thank you.
Cheers. There you have it, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, hit the notification button, and we'll look forward to hosting you next week.